modeled after the Mora. You can see it's so similar, right? But it's got more heft because it's got that full tang. Right, this one here is a rat tail tang. There's just basically a pin going into the handle. So this weighs a little bit more, right? You can feel it when you're using it. Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap, and I thought I'd do a video on knives here. All the knives, or types of knives, I've owned over the course of my experience as an outdoors person. I got them all right here. And how I arrived at the type of knife I prefer now, my reasoning for that. So I think I'm going to go through all of that. But first I'm going to just define what I consider to be a useful outdoors sort of, what one might call a bushcraft knife, but just a general purpose outdoor knife that you'd use for a number of things. And for me, that is a tool that allows you to, work wood into whatever shape you need it into for whatever reason. Whether you're getting into a piece of wood to get the dry stuff, to make a fire on a rainy day, or you're shaping, a point onto something, or you're building a trap or whatever, some contraption, whatever. The most abundant material in the forest is wood. You want basically the main raw material you use for just about everything. And you shape wood with a knife. So shaping wood, to some extent gathering wood, like if you have a tree and you want to, cut it down to some extent, right? You're not going to be cutting down like giant firewood trees, but that sort of thing. And also dressing out game and cleaning fish, basically, preparing food in a sense, right? That's the other thing the knife has to be able to do for it to be useful for me, okay? So, and I guess I should say, how do I qualify myself to be how am I qualified to say what makes or doesn't make a good knife? Because I'm not like, I've never studied under some sort of bushcraft expert or anything like that, but I've read many books on the topic. I'm kind of a voracious reader on that subject matter. And also I've spent years snaring rabbits in the woods and hunting and fishing, right? And I would say to the fledgling person that if you want to take up a pastime, a hunting exercise that develops your bushcraft skills and your hunting skills and just your outdoor skills in general, all of them, snaring rabbits is basically it. It's the cheapest thing to get into because you don't necessarily need a gun to do it. You need a hunting license. You need to be, depending on where you live, right? But you need a license that allows you to snare rabbits. But it's basically the cheapest, easiest license to get. I think here it's called a habitat stamp. And you don't need a weapon. It's handy to have one along, but you don't need one. Also, you can do it on Sundays. Here in where I live in Nova Scotia, you can't hunt on Sundays, but you can check snares on Sundays. So you can do it both weekend days, right? You just can't take a firearm with you on Sundays. But when you're doing that activity, you're out in the woods for a couple hours, either every day or every other day, or whenever you can get. You really should check your snares at least every 2 days. And you're using a knife a lot, right? Every time you set a snare, it's rare you don't need a knife to set a snare. And if you've got a snare line with 20 snares, it means you're going to be using your knife, a lot over the course of time. So you'll get a sense of what makes a knife useful or not. And of course, when you get the rabbits, you have to dress them out. So you're dressing game, you're shaping wood, and you're gathering wood, right? You're cutting branches off of trees or cutting whole saplings off to use them in various aspects of setting the snare. So what did I start with? I started with something, not that. I started off with this sort of thing. Just simple pocket knife, lock blade, cheap, easy to get, and you can put it in your back pocket. But I find I would lose them a lot. I just lost them all the time. Either I'd develop a hole in my back pocket and they'd fall out, or I'd be using it to do something and I'd set it down because I needed to use it again. Like I'd set it down to have both my hands for a minute or two, and then I'd plan was to pick it back up and I just leave it and disappear forever, right? And why they make knives with this one here with wooden, I mean, all knives should be as visible as possible so you don't lose them. I don't know why they make knives with wood and earth. Basically, it looks like the ground. It's the worst color ever. But anyway, so I graduated away from this, and I started using crazy stuff like this, right? I was, because a lot of the stuff I was watching, especially on television, for some reason, YouTube videos and television, I mean, there really wasn't YouTube back then, but basically like hunting shows and things like that, they're all using these big badass knives, right? And in movies, they're using that sort of stuff, and you're gathering information from all around. So I would basically use what I saw people using And something like this is handy for limbing trees and doing all kinds of heavy stuff. But for dressing on a rabbit, you basically have to hold it like this so you can have control. And you can do it, but you gotta put your hand around the sharp part. And this is very sharp, but you gotta hold it like this so you have the control to, you know, deal with the evisceration of that process, right? So, and for fish and stuff like that, it's just useless. Just too clumsy. You can get by with this, but it's just a poor tool for many of the things you use a knife for, and for doing any sort of fine carving. You can do it, but it's a poor tool, right? So you're giving up a lot of functionality for weight and heft, right? This, I suppose this is weapon-like in that sense, but I've never ever in my life in the woods needed a knife as a weapon, right? The only thing that's dangerous out here is a black bear, and if a black bear attacked me, this would do nothing, right? It would do nothing. I would just be dead. So anyway, I stopped using, I stopped using this, and I graduated to using one of these things. I actually bought one of these on eBay. This is the Solingen, kind of like a World War II knife. I just like the look of it. It has a real sort of hunting knife look to it. I used one of these for a season, and I actually lost it. I left it in the snow. I was walking, and I dropped it, and it just vanished. Right? But it was clumsy. It was good in a lot of ways. But one thing it won't do is it's this here particular knife, Solingen. It's terrible for sparking. You can throw sparks with it, but it's really bad. And I mean, I've done my best to throw sparks with a knife. You need like a 95-degree angle on the back spine, like a hockey skate. You don't use the sharp part, you use the back. It will throw them, but it does it in a way that's almost useless. So if you ever were in a situation where you needed to do that, it wouldn't be reliable. But also I just found it to be, where did I put the sheath? Just sort of clumsy. Also, you know, I've mentioned this in previous videos, I tend to like using the neck knife. It's a bit much knife for a neck knife. It's a bit big and heavy. Same with the other one I just showed you. It's just a bit too much. Right? So I stopped using this. Then I bought one of these things. So this is a cold steel knife. And this here knife didn't come with a handle or anything. It was just almost like a blank. It had this big, heavy bar that you'd hang onto, and it just had rope wrapped around it. And it had a weird shape. It was basically shaped like some sort of combat fighting knife. But even then, like the end of it sort of went on a weird triangle. You couldn't even, I don't know what it was for. It was I got it for 20 bucks. It was cheap. But it had an end with a point that you couldn't even stab into something. Really, really thick back to it, right? Anyway, it had a weird shape. So I actually used, what's that called? A belt sander, very carefully to change the profile. And I gave it this nice curved shape, a nice pointy tip. And I used this for a season. It's a great knife in many ways, but for me, it's really too much knife. I mean, I put a proper handle on it. You can see it's easy to hang on to. It has this stupid ricasso. That's what this here's part's called. It's like the part between the handle and the blade. That's some knives, the sharp part doesn't go all the way to the handle. There's basically a dull part in between. It's called a ricasso. I don't know what the hell that's for. It's just the dumbest thing ever. There's no need of it. You know, basically the closer what you're doing with the knife is to your hand, the more power you have, right? If you're pushing, right, the further the thing you're trying to cut is from your hand, the more leverage the knife has against your hand, right? So you want the blade to go right to the handle. And I've never cut my knife hand with the knife, right? It's always your other hand, right? Anyway, I used this for a season, but I found it was sort of too much knife. It was still a bit clumsy. It was heavy. I had to use it as a belt knife because I felt it was just, I don't have like a fire hydrant neck, so I didn't feel it to be very good around the neck. So I just gave up on it. You'll see I added this to the handle to make it a little harder to lose when you drop it in the snow, right? Because again, it's sort of invisible on the ground. But you add something like this, it makes it a little bit more visible, right? So after that, I read Morris Kahansky's book, Northern Bushcraft. And he sold me on the Mora knife. And this was my original Mora knife. I actually replaced the handle on it because I dropped it in my backyard and left it outside for an entire year. I think the handles on these are made of birch. The handle rotted right off of it. So I made a new handle. So the handles on these normally is sort of ellipse type shape. So they're very simple wooden handled knife. This is just the original basic Mora with this thin little blade. Anyway, I really liked this knife and I used it for a couple seasons. It sort of did everything I wanted it to do. A bit light though, you know, it'll do everything, but if you're trying to, like, you know, if you got a branch and you're trying to get the limbs off of it, it's a little bit light. It doesn't have any momentum of its own, but as a nice light knife, it does a lot of things. And you can dress a deer out with one of those. You can do a lot of things with it. But I graduated from that to this sort of thing. I've had this for years. And I've done everything with this knife. I've done deer with this. I've taken it with me fishing. I've you know, marked trails with, done everything with it. So this is basically the, you know, the knife that's the same width as your hand, right? You got a palm handle and a palm blade. That's what Morse Kohansky recommends. And I really do like this arrangement. I've been using this for years. I've got a few more versions of it. I really do think this is the all-around versatile knife. And it really, when you watch a lot of these outdoors bushcraft guys on TV, they're always using something bigger and beefier than this. I don't know what they're doing with their knives. Because I have dressed out deer, I've taken down wrist-thick trees. I've done everything you could possibly do with this, right? So now, I mean, one of the arguments against this is that it doesn't have a full tang blade. And so there's always the risk, if you're batoning it, that the handle can sort of give up. That's possible, right? I haven't had it happen yet, but I don't baton my blade a lot because I think it's just about the dumbest thing you can do. Anything other than light batoning, I think, is, you'd only do that in some sort of emergency, right? For me, you should have a folding saw with you, right? Because it's way more useful than a baton knife, right? I can take down a serious tree, right? I can take down a tree that's like 6, 7, 8 inches in diameter with this. I can't do that with this. Now, if I was ever stranded in the woods and needed to make a fire to keep myself warm overnight because I had no big sleeping bag or anything like that, this would not do it for me. I'd have to either be lucky enough to find dead trees that I could push over and use them, or I'd have to have something like this to take down trees. This will not do it. It's useless in the winter for, you know, actually felling trees to keep yourself warm. And where I live, I mean, these things are all relative to your environment. There's always dead trees. They're spruce forests. Spruce trees don't live very long. They live like 50 years and they're always dying. So just looking around me here, there's all kinds of trees. If I had to build a shelter, I don't think you know, if I just 50 feet in each direction, I think there's probably enough materials to erect one right here, sort of thing. And this is a swamp, right? There's trees everywhere here, and there's dead trees everywhere. So anyway, so this is the sort of type of knife I tend to use. But you know, and you can see I've got here, like, these are my kids' knives, right? I got this one for my daughter. She tends to leave things lying around, so I got the most visible looking Mora to find. It's got a slightly shorter blade, but this will do everything you need, right? And this is my son's, right? Again, harder to lose, but this one is almost identical. This one is basically identical to mine. It's the same knife. The only difference is this one has a guard. And you can see with mine, I've basically ground the guard off. Guards are for knife fighting, so you really don't need a guard. At least that's my opinion. I've never felt, you know, that the guard offered any value at all. So, you know, if you are a younger person and you don't have a lot of money, and this is all you're able to find, this is a perfectly fine knife. Like I said, I've had this one for years. You know, I don't know, maybe 20 years, right? Still fine. I've done everything you can imagine with it. It's still fine. So if you're short on cash, you don't need to, you watch a lot of these outdoors videos, they're using the most expensive knives and they're doing all these things, you know, hitting it with hammers and trying to show how tough it is. But when are you going to be doing that out in the woods? you know, so you know, you're carving, dressing out game, you're doing basic things like that, maybe a little light batoning. This knife will stand up to it, and you can get one of these for 20-30 bucks, I think, right? So that's you know, that's my recommendation. Some other things I tried over the years, just to show you, I became enamored with this knife so much that I bought 2 of them. So this one is actually a full tang knife. I'm always on this quest to search for like a $20-30 knife that does everything, right? So this one here, you know, the blade is 1 palm long, right? It's reasonably thick. I would say it's a 1/16 of an inch thick blade. It cuts really, really well. I used this on my snare line for a season. I just loved it. It weighs nothing, right? It goes around your neck. It's just a joy to use for cleaning fish, for dressing things out. It's just wonderful in every way, except one summer, I can't remember why I was doing this, but I was limbing a spruce tree. Okay, just limbing it off, just pushing, right? Pushing at the branches, taking them off the tree. And a nick, literally, because the blade's so thin, and it's got a weird, it basically has a gradual taper from the top to the bottom. It's got a different sort of, what's that called? A different grind than most knives, right? Most knives are thick. This here knife, basically, it gets thinner and thinner. Basically, the grind starts at the top and ends at the bottom, right? The grind starts at the top and ends at the bottom. It's a continuous grind, which gives it an exquisite edge, right? That's why it's so nice to use. You know, by contrast, this Mora knife has what's called a Scandi grind, where the grind really begins right about there, right? It's the last ½ centimeter, right? The last 1/4 inch, right? Begins here, ends at the edge, right? So it's basically thicker, right? So this knife, the grind's like this, right? With the Mora, it's a bit more like that. So it is prone to, it literally will chip when you're limbing a branch. There's a risk of it. Mine chipped, right? So I actually took it and, where is it here? I reground it to this, right? So that's what, you know, that's where that knife go. This was so damaged that I had to turn it into this to save the blade, right? So this is a very different kind of knife now, but I still like it. I still, you know, if I go fishing just for the afternoon, I usually have this around my neck. It's great for fish. It's sharp as hell, unbelievably sharp, but you know, not reliable for, you know, limbing and stuff like that. And in bushcraft, you do a lot of limbing, especially on a snare line. Limbing is a thing you just do, right? So not useful for me. The knife I have, oh, another one here. There was a season where I've been using my Mora for a number of years, and I saw these on sale. This is it's called a sloyd knife. It's for carving wood. I saw them on sale on Amazon for like 20 bucks. And it's so small and so light. And I remember Morris Kohansky saying that you could dress out a moose with a 2.5 inch blade. This has a 2.5 inch blade. So I bought, it's so cheap, right? 20 bucks. I bought this thing and used it on my snare line for a season. And it was fine for cleaning rabbits. It was fine for, really great for like working wood. You know, if you have to put a 7-notch or notching things, little operations like that. Great for carving. Fine for all that sort of stuff. But limbing, the thing's got no weight at all. This weighs nothing, right? So when you're limbing, you want a little bit of weight in that. You want to feel it. It should feel like a roll of loonies or something. Like, you should have some weight in your hand. This literally feels like nothing. And I didn't find it to be good for limbing. I couldn't just push down and take branches off. I had to use, what's that called? Like the push cut most of the time. So nice light knife, cheap, great for carving, great for a lot of things. But, you know, just didn't do it. And then about a year ago, a year or 2 years ago, I came across, probably 2 years ago, came across this. And I can't, what's it called? BPS knives. And all these knives are carbon steel blades, you'll notice. And the reason you want a carbon steel blade is because they're sparky, right? Really good at throwing out sparks. And all the Mora knives I showed you are carbon steel blades, except I think this one might be, That's carbon steel as well. It's just it's been used so little, right? That hasn't gotten a patina yet. But anyway, yeah, it's called BPS knives. They're a company in the Ukraine, and these knives are. This is a full tang knife. You can see, right? Full tang, and you know, I would say maybe 2 millimeters thick. It's much thicker, right? It's basically, I would say, where are we here? It's modeled after the Mora knife, right? Very similar. Where's my other one here? You notice, see it's modeled after the Mora. You can see it's so similar, right? But it's got more heft because it's got that full tang, right? This one here is a rat tail tang. There's just basically a pin going into the handle. So this weighs a little bit more, right? And you can feel it when you're using it. But it feels exactly like the Mora. If anything, it's better because it seems to have a more continuous curve in the blade. Beautiful curve to it, but it's very simple. It's clearly modeled after the Mora, right? And these cost like 20 bucks. I mean, yeah, you have to get it shipped all the way from the Ukraine, but I don't know what that costs, $5 or something like that. It's worth it. Now these come, and I'm not getting any money from these guys. I mean, I've only got 800, you know, no one gives you a sponsorship deal when you have 900 subscribers. Okay, so I don't have any sort of deal with these guys. I emailed them and I asked them, they never got back to me. But they come with a handle. Okay, everything's getting tangled here now. So they come with a handle. This is the handle they come with. The handle, or not handle, the sheath. The sheath is useless. The knife, you can put it in there, right? But to me, a proper knife sheath, remember I'm using everything as a neck knife. So the sheath it comes with, it fits the knife and you can put a rope around it and put it around your neck, but it's not a one hand, you literally have to use two hands to get this out. So it's inconvenient. For me, any sort of knife, you should be able to get the knife with one hand, no matter what. Maybe you're holding something with this hand, you need to cut it. All the knives here on my list here are one-hand operation knives. You can get it out of the sheath. If it's in the belt knife, you can get it out with one hand. You can put it back in with one hand. If you're using a neck knife, you can get it out with one hand, put it back in with one hand. The sheath that this comes with is useless. And the great thing is you can buy it with or without the sheath, so don't buy the sheath. Now, even this sheath here. So, this sheath here, I took one of these knives. I soaked this in water overnight. And I took one of these knives and wrapped all kinds of stuff, you know, paper and stuff around it. And I stuffed it in here to make the sheath, to stretch it, right? I mean, I really stuffed it in there. And I mean, let's see here. The idea was that I could convert it, right, to being a one-hander. So I stuffed it in there, and it's kind of a one-hander. I guess it's not so bad. I feel like it wasn't this good before. Maybe it's stretched over the years. Maybe it's, anyway, basically the sheath it comes with, it doesn't operate well as a one-hander. Actually, this one's working pretty good now. I'm telling you, a year ago, this did not come out so easily. Maybe if you pound it in there, will it come out? It still comes out fine. It should be that you put the knife in the sheath, and even if it comes upside down, it shouldn't come out. But it should be that with one hand, you can get it out. And one hand, you can put it back in. I'm telling you, a year, this is funny because a year ago it would not do this. I've had, boy, that's tight. I've been using this sheath with it because it just comes in and comes out so easily, right? So I've been using this, but maybe I'll go back to using this. I think one of the problems is that, see, I always like to have a ferro rod attached to my knife sheath. And once you use the elastic bands to attach the ferro rod to this, it makes it just tight enough that it hangs on to the blade and it won't come out with one hand. So you lose that versatility, right? I like to have a knife sheath where I've got a means to make fire. And usually tucked in the back, I've got some other things, you know, a little bit of wax paper, ready to go tinder. You know, I usually have some, like here, I've got electrical tape wrapped around the knife You can use that as a band-aid or to repair things. You know, it's just sort of handy to have some electrical tape along with you for various reasons. It's an all-purpose repairing thing for repairing you and things, right? You can solve a lot of problems quickly with electrical tape, right? And it's basically, you can't find anything even remotely like that in the forest. There's nothing that comes close to it. It's, you know, a 20th century thing. Anyway, so I switched to using this, right? Because it's easy to take it in and out. It's a one-hand operation, right? And I can put it around my neck, right? That sort of thing. I know some people don't like the neck knife because they think it's it flops around, but you just stick it in between the buttons of you. You always wear a button-up shirt, and you stick it in between the buttons. And it doesn't flop around, right? You got it when you need it, right? You tend to, when you're in the woods, you tend to wear the same thing all the time. You know, you sort of have an outdoors uniform sort of thing. So you just make sure the length is perfect for where the holes are on the buttons. And then you've got that ready to go. Anyway, yeah, I think that's why, even though I'd stretch this out, and it works good, and this weighs a lot less than this this heavy thing here. But I think once you attach a ferro rod to this, maybe there's a better way to do it, it squeezes the blade such that I can just feel it there. Once you put a ferro rod on here with an elastic band, it hangs onto the blade and it won't come out easily. So you lose that ease of operation. All right, so anyway, this is the knife I arrived at. This BPS Knives knife. Inexpensive, basically costs the same as a Mora. And is the quality of steel the same? I don't know, I'm not an expert on these matters. You know, I've used it on a snare line for 2 seasons. I've batoned it. I've got a video where I make a canoe, actually made 2 canoe paddles with a tree I chopped down and used this knife to do that, right? I've used it to dress out deer. I've used it to do, you know, for rabbits, for fish, for for just about every sort of bushcrafty type outdoorsy thing you can imagine, from really fine, delicate things, making fine tools out of wood, to heavier things like making a canoe paddle, right? And splitting wood, you know, hitting it with a mallet to crack. You know, there's I think a video where I take a tree, a big length of wood, and I split the whole thing in half, and I start it with using this knife, right? So, you know, I can't say, I'm not a metal expert, I don't know the quality of the metal, but it stood up to everything I've used it for, and it's like 20 bucks, right? Again, I wouldn't bother buying the sheath. I would make your own sheath. I haven't done a video on how to make sheaths, but I do need to make one for another knife, so I'm going to be doing one of those soon, just as soon as I got you know, the right day to do it. It's not hard to do. All you need is some sort of tube, but there's different materials you can use, but any old tube of plastic will do. This is just a piece of pipe that you'd put together for a vacuum cleaner, right? People throw these things away all the time. You can always find sort of plastic tubing, and every plastic has a temperature where you heat it to where it doesn't burn, but it bends, right? So all you really do is you just wrap some stuff around the blade of the knife, and you make the handle, you wrap some things around the handle to make the handle a little bit thicker than it really is, and to make a smooth transition between the handle and knife, you basically put like popsicle sticks on it like that, and down here, and you put some tape around there, and then you add some cardboard, so you basically make this nice sort of space. And you heat up some plastic like this, and when it's nice and hot and soft, you stuff the knife into the length you want. I would say half the length of the handle, and then you squeeze down. you just squeeze on it. There are various ways to do that, and sort of hold it like that until the plastic rehardens around it. And you've got like a custom-made knife sheath. They're very cheap to make, very easy to do. And then you can attach whatever kind of thing you want to either hang it to your belt or around your neck, right? But these are great little, you know, and because it's a bit beefier than a leather knife sheath, you can attach things to it and make it like a little toolkit, right? You can put a sewing needle in there, you can put a fishing kit in there, you can do all kinds of things. A little bit, you know, you can put like 10 feet of monofilament line in there, and you're basically all set for everything, right? So anyway, I think that's all of them. Those are the knives I've had over the course of my life as an outdoors person. I suppose honorable mention to having, I always have a pocket knife with me. You know, and when I have a pocket knife, it tends to be a bit of a toolkit. I like this here one. This is I think it's a German soldier's knife. It's a Victorinox knife. It's made by, you know, Swiss-made knife. You know, my review on this would be a separate video, but I don't think this is the best pocket knife you can get, but it's the best one I could find that does all the things I want. Let's put it that way. So I got about, I don't know, 8 or 10 tools in this, so it's a good backup for a lot of things. It has a saw, it's got a screwdriver, and you know, bottle opener and a can opener, and look, it's even got a Phillips head, right? So it's got basically, if you got gear with you, you can fix your gear. It just solves a lot of problems, and it's a fairly beefy knife that you can use for just about everything. Nice and sharp as hell. It's not carbon steel, but the good thing about having a knife with a folding saw, right, is that your saw blade's always sparky as hell, right? So you've always got that. So anyway, that's the knives I've had over the course of my my time on this earth as an outdoors person as of the age of 49. To me, this sort of thing, you don't have to use this brand, but this is all the knife you need. I saw a guy do a review, some guy, really prominent outdoors channel guy, lots of views, lots of subscribers. He said this was a women's knife. I'm 6'4", 210-pound man. I've dressed out deer with this and made paddles with it. I suppose any woman could do that. But I don't know what it means to call a knife a woman's knife. I'm 6'4". I've got as big a hand as most human beings have a smaller hand than me. This is fine for my 6'4" man's hand. It fits perfectly in my 6'4" man's hand. And it does everything I need it to do. Hunting, fishing, bushcrafting. So I guess I'm a woman. So ladies and gents, this is a fine knife. Someone calls it a woman's knife, they just don't know what the hell they're talking about, or I don't even know what that means, right? It is a useful bushcraft knife that does everything you need it to do in the woods. So it's a bushcraft knife, not a man's knife, not a woman's knife, it's just a knife. So hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.